The cleaning lady looked up from polishing the mahogany conference table, her eyes meeting Marcus Whitfield's cold stare with an intensity that made him step backward. "Know your place," he had just barked at her, his voice dripping with the kind of arrogance that comes from believing you're untouchable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What happened next would shatter everything Marcus thought he knew about power, wealth, and who really controlled the empire he believed was his. Her response was just 4 words, spoken with a quiet confidence that cut through the air like a blade. "I built this company." My name is David Richardson, and 6 weeks ago I was the Chief Financial Officer of Whitfield Industries, one of Chicago's most successful manufacturing conglomerates. I had a prestigious office on the 47th floor, a salary that most people could only dream of, and what I believed was the complete trust of my CEO, Marcus Whitfield. Today I'm sitting in a federal witness protection facility, preparing to testify in what will become the most explosive corporate fraud case in Illinois history. But this story doesn't begin with fraud or embezzlement or any of the white-collar crimes you might expect. It begins with arrogance and a 62-year-old cleaning woman named Dorothy Martinez who possessed secrets that would bring down a billionaire. Let me take you back to that Tuesday morning in September, the day that changed everything. Whitfield Industries headquarters buzzed with its usual corporate energy. Executives rushing between meetings, assistants juggling multiple phone calls, and the constant hum of a business empire that generated over $2 billion in annual revenue. Marcus Whitfield ruled this domain from his corner office like a modern-day emperor, and those of us in senior management were his trusted generals. Or so we thought. I arrived at work that morning with my usual routine: coffee from the lobby Starbucks, quick review of the overnight financial reports, and preparation for the quarterly board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. As CFO, these presentations were my specialty. I knew every number, every projection, every financial detail that kept Whitfield Industries at the top of the manufacturing food chain. The company had an impressive origin story that Marcus loved to tell at investor meetings and corporate events. Founded in 1987 by his late father Robert Whitfield, as a small automotive parts supplier, the business had grown exponentially under Marcus's leadership after he took over in 2001. What started as a modest operation in a converted warehouse had transformed into a sprawling enterprise, with factories across the Midwest, government contracts worth hundreds of millions, and a stock price that had tripled in the past 5 years. Marcus was particularly proud of the company's technological innovations. Our proprietary manufacturing processes had revolutionized how certain automotive and aerospace components were produced, giving us significant competitive advantages and patent protections that generated substantial licensing revenue. The intellectual property portfolio alone was valued at over $800 million. As I prepared for the board meeting, I noticed unusual activity in the executive wing. Dorothy Martinez, one of our longtime cleaning staff, was working during business hours, which was uncommon. Typically, the janitorial crew operated after regular office hours to avoid disrupting daily operations. Dorothy had been with the company for over 15 years, a quiet, efficient woman who seemed to blend into the background of corporate life. She was methodically cleaning the conference room where our board meeting would take place, paying particular attention to the mahogany table that Marcus had imported from Italy at a cost of $40,000. The attention to detail wasn't unusual for Dorothy. She took pride in her work, but something about her demeanor that morning struck me as different. There was a deliberation in her movements, as if she were preparing for something more significant than a routine cleaning. Marcus arrived 15 minutes before the meeting, his usual practice of ensuring everything was perfect before the board members entered. He was immaculately dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his silver hair styled to perfection, projecting the image of success and authority that had made him a fixture in Chicago's business elite circles. At 54, Marcus possessed the kind of commanding presence that made people naturally defer to his judgment. He surveyed the conference room with the critical eye of someone accustomed to perfection, checking the placement of water glasses, the alignment of folders at each seat, and the positioning of the large monitor that would display our quarterly financial presentations. This attention to detail was part of what made Marcus successful, but it also revealed his need for absolute control over every aspect of his environment. Dorothy was still in the room, putting finishing touches on the crystal water pitchers, when Marcus's mood suddenly shifted. I watched from the doorway as his expression hardened, the polished executive facade giving way to something uglier underneath. "What are you still doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp with irritation. "The meeting starts in 10 minutes. Dorothy looked up calmly, continuing to arrange the water service. "Almost finished, Mr. Whitfield, just ensuring everything is perfect for your important meeting." The tone of her response seemed to irritate Marcus further. Perhaps it was the slight emphasis she placed on important. Or maybe it was simply his pre-meeting stress. But his reaction was disproportionate and revealing. "I don't pay you to think about the importance of my meetings," he snapped. "I pay you to clean and disappear. The board members don't want to see help wandering around during business discussions." Dorothy's hands stilled on the water pitcher she was adjusting. For a moment the room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. I found myself holding my breath, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. "Know your place," Marcus continued, his voice rising with each word. "You're the cleaning lady. Act like it." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I saw something shift in Dorothy's posture. She straightened slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. When she turned to face Marcus directly, there was an authority in her bearing that I had never noticed before, as if a mask she had worn for years was finally being removed. "I built this company," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. The statement was so unexpected, so seemingly impossible, that for a moment none of us processed what she had actually said. Marcus's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then anger. "What did you say?" he demanded, his voice lower now but dangerous. Dorothy reached into her cleaning cart and withdrew a manila folder that looked distinctly out of place among the spray bottles and cleaning supplies. "I said I built this company. Every patent, every innovation, every technological breakthrough that made Whitfield Industries successful. They came from my designs, my research, my work." She placed the folder on the conference table with deliberate care. "Your father didn't hire me as a cleaning lady 15 years ago, Marcus. He hired me to hide me." The implications of her words began to sink in, but before Marcus could respond, Dorothy continued, her voice gaining strength with each revelation. "My real name is Dr. Dorothy Chen Martinez. I have 3 PhDs in mechanical engineering, materials science, and industrial design from MIT. I hold 47 patents that are currently generating millions in licensing revenue for this company. Patents that were filed under shell companies and attributed to fictional research teams to hide my involvement." Marcus's face had gone pale, but his voice remained defiant. "That's impossible. You're delusional. Security!" "Security won't help you," Dorothy replied calmly. "Because in about 5 minutes, the board members walking into this room are going to learn that the company they've been investing in for over 2 decades was built on a foundation of fraud, patent theft, and identity manipulation." She opened the folder and spread its contents across the conference table. Even from my position in the doorway, I could see technical drawings, patent applications, and what appeared to be correspondence between Dorothy and Robert Whitfield dating back to the late 1980s. "Your father discovered my work when I was a graduate student at Northwestern University. My thesis project involved revolutionary manufacturing processes that could reduce production costs by 60% while improving quality. Instead of offering me a job or partnership, he stole my research and offered me a deal. Disappear from the academic world, let him claim credit for my innovations, and he would ensure I was financially secure for life." Marcus was staring at the documents spread across his precious conference table, his usual composure completely shattered. "This is insane. Even if any of this were true, which it isn't, it would be impossible to prove after all these years." Dorothy's smile was patient, almost maternal. "I've been documenting everything for 25 years, Marcus. Every conversation with your father. Every new innovation I developed while pretending to be part of the cleaning staff. Every modification to existing patents. I have recordings, prototypes, correspondence, and most importantly, I have witnesses." The conference room door opened, and the first board member entered, Elizabeth Crawford, the silver-haired chairwoman who had overseen Whitfield Industries' transition from a family business to a publicly traded corporation. Her expression suggested she had been expecting this confrontation. "Good morning, Dorothy," she said warmly, completely ignoring Marcus's shocked expression. "I believe it's time we had that conversation we discussed." As more board members filed into the room, each greeting Dorothy with familiarity and respect, the true scope of what was unfolding became clear. This wasn't a spontaneous revelation or a moment of workplace defiance. This was a carefully orchestrated unveiling that had been years in the making. Marcus sank into his chair at the head of the conference table, the weight of his crumbling world visible in his posture. The man who had spent decades believing he was the architect of a business empire was about to learn that he had been nothing more than a figurehead, a useful facade, hiding the true genius behind Whitfield Industries' success. And I, David Richardson, trusted CFO and keeper of financial secrets, was about to discover that the numbers I had been managing for years told only half the story of one of the most elaborate corporate deceptions in American business history. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What happened next transformed our quarterly board meeting into something resembling a corporate tribunal. As the remaining board members took their seats, I noticed they weren't carrying the usual financial reports or quarterly assessments. Instead, each had identical black binders that they placed deliberately on the table before them. Elizabeth Crawford, as board chairwoman, called the meeting to order with an authority that seemed to diminish Marcus's presence at the head of the table. Before we begin today's proceedings, I believe we need to address some fundamental questions about the true ownership and management of this company. Marcus attempted to regain control of the situation. Elizabeth, I don't know what Dorothy has told you, but she's clearly having some kind of breakdown. We should postpone this meeting until security can escort her out, and we can proceed with our actual business. Sit down, Marcus. Crawford's voice cut through his protest with surgical precision. You're about to learn why we've allowed this charade to continue for as long as we have. The boardroom fell silent. In my 6 years as CFO, I had never heard anyone speak to Marcus Whitfield with such dismissive authority. The man who commanded respect through intimidation and wealth suddenly appeared small and uncertain. Crawford opened her black binder and began reading from what appeared to be a legal document. According to the original incorporation papers filed in 1987, Whitfield Industries was established as a joint venture between Robert Whitfield and a silent partner identified only as D. Chen Enterprises. The partnership agreement specified that D. Chen Enterprises would retain controlling interest in all intellectual property developed by the company, while Robert Whitfield would handle operations and serve as the public face of the business. She looked directly at Dorothy, who had remained standing beside her cleaning cart throughout this exchange. Dr. Dorothy Chen Martinez, would you please explain to Mr. Marcus Whitfield the nature of your relationship with his father? Dorothy moved to the opposite end of the conference table, her demeanor now completely transformed from the subservient cleaning lady I had observed for years. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment for decades. Robert Whitfield was desperate when he approached me in 1986. His automotive parts company was failing, hemorrhaging money, and facing bankruptcy within 6 months. He had heard about my research through mutual contacts at Northwestern University and saw it as his salvation. She gestured to the technical drawings she had spread across the table. These manufacturing processes could revolutionize industrial production, but implementing them required significant capital investment and technical expertise that Robert didn't possess. So we made an agreement. Marcus leaned forward, his face flushed with anger and confusion. What kind of agreement? My father never mentioned any partners. He built this company from nothing. Your father built the business infrastructure, Dorothy corrected. But every major innovation that drove your growth came from my laboratory. The precision molding techniques that landed your first government contracts, the heat-resistant alloys that made your aerospace components possible, the automated assembly processes that cut production costs by 40%, all of my designs. Board member Thomas Hayes, whom I knew to be one of our earliest investors, opened his binder and pulled out a stack of photographs. These were taken in 1988 at the original facility. Note the woman in the laboratory coat working alongside the technical staff. He passed the photographs around the table. Even in the grainy images, Dorothy was clearly recognizable, 25 years younger, but unmistakably the same person. She was shown operating complex machinery, reviewing technical specifications, and directing what appeared to be prototype development. Why would my father hide this? Marcus demanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier aggression. If Dorothy was genuinely contributing to the company's development, why not acknowledge her role publicly? The question hung in the air before Dorothy answered with a bitter smile. Because I'm a woman, Marcus. And in 1987, a Chinese-American woman holding multiple advanced engineering degrees was not the image your father wanted associated with his all-American manufacturing company. She pulled a chair from the wall and sat down at the conference table for the first time in the 15 years I had known her. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Your father was terrified that investors and clients would lose confidence if they discovered that their innovative manufacturing solutions came from someone who didn't fit their expectations of what an industrial genius should look like. So we agreed that I would work behind the scenes, developing new technologies and processes while he took public credit. Crawford interjected. The original partnership agreement included specific provisions for this arrangement. Dr. Chen would receive 51% ownership of all intellectual property and technological innovations, while maintaining anonymity. Robert Whitfield would retain operational control and serve as the public representative of the company. I found myself asking the question that was burning in my mind. But why continue the deception for so long? Why work as a cleaning lady when you could have claimed your rightful position years ago? Dorothy's expression grew somber, because Robert Whitfield was an honorable man who kept his word. He ensured I was well compensated for my work, far better than any university position could have provided. The cleaning lady role was perfect cover. I could move freely throughout the facility, observe operations, identify areas for improvement, and continue developing new innovations without arousing suspicion. She gestured around the room. Every major breakthrough Whitfield Industries has achieved in the past 25 years happened because I had unlimited access to observe problems firsthand. I could see where production lines were inefficient, where quality control was failing, where new technologies could be implemented. The cleaning cart was my mobile laboratory. Marcus slumped in his chair, the full implications beginning to sink in. So when my father died in 2001, he made arrangements to ensure the partnership would continue, Crawford finished. The board of directors was fully informed about Dr. Chen's role and her ownership stake in the company's intellectual property. We've been honoring Robert's commitments for the past 22 years. The room fell silent as this revelation settled over us. I began mentally reviewing every financial statement, every patent licensing agreement, every technology development cost I had processed during my tenure as CFO. The numbers suddenly made sense in ways they never had before. The research and development expenses, I said aloud, pieces clicking into place. The consulting fees to shell companies that I could never quite track down. The equipment purchases that seemed excessive for our stated R&D activities. Dorothy nodded approvingly. Very good, David. Those were payments for my continued work and the resources I needed to keep developing new technologies. Your financial management helped make it possible to maintain the arrangement without raising questions from external auditors. Hayes pulled out another document from his binder. Dr. Chen has continued to file patents under various corporate entities controlled by the partnership agreement. In the past 5 years alone, her innovations have generated over $300 million in licensing revenue for Whitfield Industries. The magnitude of what I was learning began to overwhelm me. Not only had I been unknowingly managing the finances of a company with a completely different ownership structure than I understood, but the woman I had barely noticed for years was actually the driving force behind our technological success. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke again. Why now? Why reveal all of this today? Dorothy's expression hardened. Because you've forgotten the values your father embodied. Robert Whitfield understood that our partnership was built on mutual respect and shared success. He treated me as an equal partner, even if the public couldn't know about our arrangement. She stood and walked to where Marcus sat, her presence now commanding rather than subservient. But you, Marcus, have spent 22 years believing you inherited a company built by your father's genius alone. You've grown arrogant, dismissive, and cruel. This morning's display of contempt was simply the final straw. Crawford opened her binder to a new section. Dr. Chen has decided to exercise her option to dissolve the partnership agreement and reclaim full ownership of all intellectual property developed under the Whitfield Industries umbrella. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. That would destroy the company. Our entire value proposition is based on proprietary technology. Precisely, Dorothy replied with calm finality. Without access to my patents and continued innovation, Whitfield Industries becomes nothing more than a mid-sized manufacturing company with outdated equipment and no competitive advantages. As I watched this corporate empire crumble in real time, I realized that everything I thought I knew about business, success, and power had been built on an elaborate fiction. And Dorothy Chen Martinez, the quiet cleaning lady who had been invisible to me for 6 years, was about to rewrite the rules of the game entirely. The silence that followed Dorothy's ultimatum stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus sat frozen, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something approaching panic. As CFO, I could already calculate the catastrophic financial implications of losing our entire intellectual property portfolio. Without Dorothy's patents, our stock price would collapse within hours of any public announcement. Elizabeth Crawford consulted her watch with practiced composure. "Dr. Chen, perhaps you could outline the terms of your proposal before we proceed with any legal dissolution." Dorothy returned to her position at the head of the table, but now she commanded the room with an authority that made Marcus's earlier dominance seem like theater. "I'm prepared to offer Whitfield Industries a licensing agreement to continue using my patents and innovations. However, the terms will reflect the true value of these assets and my actual role in the company's success." She pulled a leather portfolio from her cleaning cart, an item so incongruous with her custodial supplies that I wondered how I had never noticed it before. "First, I will be appointed Chief Technology Officer with full authority over all research and development operations. My salary will be commensurate with my contributions, $2.8 million annually, plus equity participation." Marcus found his voice, though it cracked with desperation. "That's impossible. The board would never approve such an arrangement. The shareholders would revolt." "The shareholders," board member Patricia Nguyen interjected coldly, "will be thrilled to learn that their investment is backed by one of the most brilliant engineering minds in the country, rather than the incompetent nepotism they've actually been funding." Her words cut deeper than any financial projection could have. I watched Marcus realize that his entire identity as a successful business leader was about to be exposed as an elaborate fraud. Dorothy continued outlining her terms with the methodical precision of someone who had spent years planning this moment. "Second, I want a full public acknowledgement of my role in developing every major innovation attributed to Whitfield Industries since 1987. This includes correction of all patent filings, historical records, and corporate communications." "You'll destroy our reputation," Marcus protested weakly. "Our clients trust the Whitfield name. They've built relationships with this company based on our track record." "They've built relationships based on my work," Dorothy corrected sharply. "And they'll continue those relationships because the quality and innovation will remain the same. The only thing changing is honest attribution of credit." Thomas Hayes opened his binder to a new section filled with what appeared to be client contracts and correspondence. "We've already reached out to our major clients and government contract administrators. Preliminary discussions suggest they're more interested in maintaining access to cutting-edge technology than they are in preserving the Whitfield mythology." The systematic nature of this revelation became clear. This wasn't a spontaneous confrontation triggered by Marcus's arrogance. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated plan that had been months or possibly years in the making. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my professional curiosity overriding the shock of watching my employer's empire crumble. Dorothy's smile was patient, almost sympathetic. "David, I have been documenting irregularities in Marcus's management for the past 3 years. The board approached me 18 months ago with concerns about his leadership and suggested it might be time to transition to a more honest corporate structure." Crawford nodded toward a thick folder that had remained unopened throughout the meeting. "Dr. Chen brought several troubling issues to our attention. Marcus has been making unauthorized decisions about licensing our technology to competitors, often at rates far below market value. We suspect he's been receiving personal compensation for these arrangements." My blood ran cold. As CFO, I should have been aware of any licensing agreements that deviated from standard pricing models. The implications for my own career and potential legal liability began to sink in. "Furthermore," Dorothy continued, "Marcus has been actively sabotaging research projects that he doesn't understand, believing they're unnecessary expenses. Last year alone, he canceled 3 development programs that would have generated an estimated $150 million in additional revenue." She turned her attention back to Marcus, who had grown increasingly pale during this recitation of his failures. "Your arrogance and incompetence have cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars and threatened the livelihoods of everyone who works here." Marcus attempted one final desperate defense. Even if everything you're claiming is true, you can't just steal my company. I inherited this business from my father. It's mine by right. Actually, Patricia Nguyen said, opening her own folder to reveal legal documents, your inheritance was specifically limited to operational control and a 49% ownership stake. The majority ownership has always belonged to Dr. Chen's partnership entities. She slid a copy of Robert Whitfield's will across the table. Your father was very careful to ensure that his death wouldn't alter the fundamental partnership agreement. He understood that the company's future depended on maintaining Dr. Chen's involvement and respecting her rightful ownership. The final piece of Marcus's world collapsed as he read the document that should have been familiar to him decades ago. His father had never intended for him to have complete control of Whitfield Industries. Dorothy stood and moved to the window overlooking the Chicago skyline, her reflection transforming the cleaning lady I had known into the powerful executive she was about to become. Marcus, I'm prepared to offer you two options. You can accept a position as operations manager reporting to me with a significant reduction in salary but continued employment. Or you can resign with a severance package and non-compete agreement. What about my ownership stake? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Your 49% ownership remains intact, Crawford confirmed. However, Dr. Chen's majority control means all major decisions will require her approval. Essentially, you'll be a silent partner with no operational authority. I found myself asking the question that would determine my own future. What happens to the existing management team? Dorothy turned from the window, her expression softening slightly. David, your financial management has been exemplary, even under difficult circumstances. I'd like you to continue as CFO, but with full transparency about our actual corporate structure and partnership arrangements. The relief was overwhelming, but I had to ask the obvious follow-up question. Will there be legal ramifications for the irregular arrangements of the past few years? The statute of limitations protects most historical issues, Hayes explained. And since the partnership agreement was legitimate from the beginning, most of what appeared irregular was actually authorized under the original corporate structure. Marcus slumped forward, his head in his hands. How long do I have to decide? The transition begins immediately, Dorothy replied without sympathy. Security is already updating access codes and transferring administrative authority. You have until 5 p.m. today to clean out your personal items and decide whether you're staying as an employee or leaving entirely. As if summoned by her words, 2 security guards appeared at the conference room door, not to escort Dorothy out, as Marcus had demanded hours earlier, but to ensure his compliance with the new management structure. Crawford called for a formal vote to ratify Dr. Dorothy Chen Martinez as Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer of Whitfield Industries. The motion passed unanimously, with Marcus's vote irrelevant due to his minority ownership position. As the board members filed out to begin implementing the transition, Dorothy approached me with a folder containing what appeared to be new financial documentation. David, I'll need you to help me restructure our accounting to reflect the actual ownership and compensation arrangements. It's going to be complex, but I think you'll find the numbers finally make sense. I accepted the folder, knowing that my career was about to become far more interesting and challenging than I had ever imagined. Marcus remained seated at the conference table, staring at the documents that had destroyed his illusions of power and success. The man who had ruled this company through intimidation and inherited authority was now just another employee, subject to the decisions of the woman he had dismissed as the cleaning lady. Dorothy began packing her cleaning supplies, but I noticed she left the spray bottles and rags behind. She wouldn't be needing them anymore. There's one more thing, Marcus, she said as she reached the door. That manufacturing efficiency report you've been waiting for? It's already on your desk. I finished it last night. As she walked out of the conference room to begin her new role as CEO, I realized I had just witnessed one of the most complete reversals of power in corporate history. The arrogant boss who had demanded that a brilliant engineer know her place had discovered that her place was at the head of the boardroom table, and his place was wherever she decided to put him. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.